Stephen Timms, Labour MP for East Ham and Chair of the Work and Pensions Select Committee, joins me now. Stephen, thank you very much for sharing some time with me on this Sunday morning. Now, I appreciate it's the Labour Party conference next week in Liverpool. We are with the Tories as we speak. Stephen, let's just talk about the private schools policy, which is one of the kind of nailed-on policies that we're actually sure that Keir Starmer does want to introduce if he becomes Prime Minister next year. Now, there's been a bit of a flip-flop on this policy. You initially said you wanted to strip private schools of their charitable status, as well as charging VAT on school fees. You've taken away part of that. You're saying that you don't mind the schools being charitable, but you still want to put VAT on. Is this policy just completely confused? What's going on? Or is it another example of Sir Keir Starmer being Captain Flip-Flop?
I don't think it is. I mean, the crucial thing is the tax changes and the question of why these tax breaks are appropriate for private schools. I can't think of any justification for them. I think other than that it's the way it's always been done. I think the party's right to say that private schools should pay VAT along with everybody else, because that will generate some much needed funds to improve state schools. In the end, it's in everybody's interest, including the interests of people who send their children to private schools, for state schools to be doing a really good job.
But it's not in the interests of people who send their children to private schools to have 20% added to their bills. Keir Starmer has said, oh, well, it's hopefully the schools won't pass these charges on. But if you listen to any of the independent schools bodies, they're saying that parents will be leaving in their droves. That will then push an estimated 40,000 private school pupils into the state system. How will Labour be able to cope with those children? How quickly will they be able to build the classrooms needed to accommodate them?
Well, the Institute for Fiscal Studies looked at this and says that they don't think there will be a big move away from private schools. But I come back to the key question: why should private schools have these tax breaks? What is the justification for them, other than that's how it's always been done? I think it's absolutely right to take a fresh look at this and accept that private education should be taxed in the same way as other services. We have to pay VAT on everything else. Why not on school fees?
And what about the other criticism that actually it will make the private school system even more elitist, because your likes of your Eatons and your Winchesters, they'll be able to afford the fee hike, the parents there. These schools have got great reserves, massive endowments, lots of investments. But most independent schools are of 400 pupils or less. They're serviced by parents of children who are just about managing to afford the fees. These are the very kids one imagines that Labour are behind in terms of social mobility. They're the ones who are going to be forced out of the private sector into the state sector.
Well, private schools are overwhelmingly used by better-off families for obvious reasons, and I think it's perfectly reasonable to expect them to pay the ordinary taxes for that service that we all pay for every other service. I don't think there's any justification
but
that I've
private
heard
school parents already pay tax, don't they?
Education.
But Mr. Timms, private school parents, they pay tax. They pay tax, but they don't use the schools. So in a way, you could argue that the government owes them a rebate.
But why should education, private education, benefit from a tax break that doesn't apply to anything else?
OK, fair point, fair point. Let's move on to ULEZ if we can, because obviously I'm noting your constituency being East Ham. What do the good people of East Ham make of ULEZ? And is this a disastrous policy from the Mayor of London, who of course is for your side, Labour, Sadiq Khan?
Well, Sadiq Khan is doing a great job, and I really welcome the improvements in air quality that my constituents in East Ham have benefited from. The ULEZ came in here several years ago. There was one constituent who came to see me who was worried about it, but it went in really with very little comment, and it's definitely contributed to a much appreciated improvement in local air quality. And of course there's more that needs to be done, but it's a big step in the right direction.
There has been some criticism of Sadiq Khan in the week for taking his eye off the ball when it comes to knife crime in the capital. You'll be familiar with the tragic death of Eliane Andam on Wednesday in Croydon. Has he been focusing too much on some of these green policies and not enough on trying to rid the capital of lethal blades?
Well, what happened in Croydon was absolutely terrible, and there's been far too much of this over a period, including some tragic deaths in my own borough in Newham. I think what we need here is a really good cross-government strategy focusing on tackling this massive problem. We just haven't had that.
Yes.
The mayor is playing his part. The Met Police in my area is working really, really hard, but they don't seem to have the backing of the government. That's the change that I think is needed here.
I'm going to ask you this as well, Mr. Timms, because our viewers and listeners may not remember, but you were yourself stabbed by a constituent. There's been some talk in the news this week about the ease with which particularly young people can obtain knives online, that they can go and buy very sharp knives, zombie knives and other knives on Amazon. Do you think there should be an age limit on the purchase of knives? Do we need to bring in more regulations to stop the sales of knives to young people?
Yes, we do, specifically online sales, because of course they are not caught by the bans which apply to shops in the UK. I campaigned on this in 2018. I was promised that these changes would be in the online safety bill, and they are in the online safety bill. The online safety bill is still not yet in effect, but I'm hoping when it does come into effect, we will finally have much better protections against online sales of these appalling weapons, which too many people are still getting hold of at the moment.
And Mr. Timms, obviously it is your conference next week in Liverpool. We understand that Keir Starmer's struggling a little bit with his speech. What would you like to hear from the Labour leader next week in Liverpool?
Well, Keir Starmer has done a superb job in positioning the Labour Party as a credible alternative government. I was campaigning in Glasgow, Rutherglen in the by-election this week and met people there switching both from the Conservative Party and the SNP to Labour. And he's done a fantastic job. He's set out the 5 missions which he wants to be the hallmarks of his government. And I'm no doubt that next week we are going to start to hear some more of the details, and I think that'll be an important step forward. But the missions, the kind of 10-year missions he set out, I think are absolutely right.
Yes, although the poll gap between Labour and the Conservatives has narrowed, according to Opinion. In the Observer today, you're only 10 points ahead and you had been 25. So it's not all going right for Keir Starmer, is it?
Well, I don't think anyone expected us to be 25 points ahead by the time of the general election. I'd happily settle for 10 myself. It's a remarkable turnaround for the Labour Party since Keir became leader. And I think his speech next week will be a very important opportunity to spell out further to people how Labour will change Britain. As the chief executive of Iceland said when he resigned from the Conservative Party yesterday, nothing seems to be better today than it was when the Conservatives came to power 13 years ago. It's desperate time for a change.
Stephen Timms, thank you very much indeed for joining this morning. Lovely to speak to you.